Bruce DuMont back in hour number 2 of Beyond the Beltway. And Peter, one of your areas of expertise is cybersecurity. And I want to ask the question because there's already been some discussion as the role of social media in fanning the flames of hate on both sides. And my question to you is, does the internet need to be monitored for its thought and rhetoric?
I think that's a super slippery slope and is very dangerous. What I think Facebook and Google and others could do is just take a more active interest in identifying information that's, plainly and obviously false, identifying groups that are, curating hatred. But this shooter, the Christchurch shooter, the El Paso shooter, the Christchurch shooter, they weren't using Facebook. They may have been, radicalized through things they saw on Facebook. They're using 8chan, which is a spin-off of 4chan. And it's just kind of like a wild message board where anything goes. And you would eliminate that, there'll be a new one the next day. So, I think the companies have a responsibility to be more thoughtful in what's being used in their platform instead of just kind of cashing in every dollar that they get for advertising.
Do you think there needs to be more intrusion on the internet, Brian?
As far as like regulation, perhaps?
Regulation.
I'm a Republican, so I really don't like a lot of regulation. But we're in a position now where it's clear that Google and Facebook have been suppressing the right, conservatives, right? That's pretty clear. At the same time, I think I spoke with you, Bruce, in the past about some conversations that I've had with Brad Parscale, who's the campaign manager for Trump, and he told me at a meeting in October that I happened to meet him at that he said they knew that they were going to win in August because they were doing demographic sorts, finding people, motivating them to come to the polls. And ironically, 3 years before that, I had the same conversation with David Plouffe at another conference, who was Obama's campaign manager. They did the same thing. So can we do things on the internet to motivate people, to get them excited, to get them to the polls? Absolutely. Likewise, Google and Facebook can suppress it the wrong way. So campaigns are supposed to do that, but our supposedly objective media companies are not supposed to do that. So there's got to be something fixed there. I don't know the answer, but it's got to be fixed.
Let's go back to calls. Let's go to Tom, listening to us in New Jersey on Sirius XM satellite radio. Go ahead. Tom, are you there? Tom is gone. Let's go to Kathy in Austin, Texas. Winds are blowing great southwest tonight. Go ahead.
Hi, how are you doing?
Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to say I'm an independent who's a Trump supporter. I voted for him this last election, and I will vote for him again. And there's definitely hate-filled speech coming from the left. You can't say that it's not. I actually have a lot of liberal friends here in Austin who I can't tell them that I have supported Trump because I would probably lose them as friends. And I think that happens a lot. It's happening all over the country. So we can't really talk about supporting Trump. And there's many of us out here who aren't being counted because of that.
Rick.
And I also wanted to say, in regard to the background check to get a gun, because of the way the HIPAA laws are written, you are not able to release medical information. So that's why we're not able to hear about the issues that some of these shooters have had in the past. And also, I've been hearing just recently over the weekend that agencies are not even working with each other to release information. So I think there was one shooter that had information with the Air Force, and they didn't release it in the background check.
Right.
So until we change something in those two ways, we're not going to have a valid background check.
Peter's got a comment for you, Kathy.
Yeah, thanks for your comments, Kathy. I would just say that with respect to HIPAA, you don't necessarily need to disclose the medical condition of an individual. You could simply say that this person has a medical condition that would warrant further investigation or denial or something like that. And I think to Jennifer's point earlier, this requires work, right? It requires a debate. These are tough issues that our senators and our leaders need to come to the table and talk about. The problem that I see from my perspective, which is obviously on the left, is we don't have a leader in the Senate who's willing to have those hard conversations. So we keep having the same type of result.
Jennifer.
I think that when we're talking about background checks and expanding them and putting some teeth in background checks, and Trump already expanded the background check provisions, but if we're going to go further with that, okay, that's fine. But Bernie Sanders just today said that, well, if we do this, it's a good first step. So you looked at that and you said a first step, the tightening the background checks. What's the second step? What's the third step and the fourth step and the fifth step? And that's when people who are Second Amendment proponents look at this and they say, is the objective eventually to take guns out of the hands of law-abiding citizens? Background checks be damned. They've already got past the background checks. What is next? So I think that that cloud is hanging over this debate. The Democrats, by and large, don't want us to look at it this way. They're saying that, well, this is common sense gun legislation. But what comes after that? That, I think the devil is always in the details.
Peter,
I just
go
had, so I had a question and a comment. So what specifically did Trump do to tighten background checks? You mentioned that he did something, so what was it?
There was a universal background check provision that
Right.
was put through along with the bump stock ban, which Trump also put through that Obama never did, even though the Democrats were after Trump to do it, or after Obama to do it, he never did. So that was part of the gun control
So-
measure. It was part of that bill. You'd have to look it up. I don't know
In the wake of
exactly
Las
what
Vegas.
it was.
Okay.
Right.
That is, and that I'm aware
That
of
was
that.
good.
That is good, but it is not even a quarter step, not even a tenth of a step. It's nothing. That's one. No, the comment I was going to make is, hearing Bernie Sanders saying background checks are a first step, I think you are reading into it that, step two is to take away their guns. It's a good first step because we have taken no meaningful steps. You know what a good second step to me would be? Potentially banning something like, AR-15s, or at least limiting them to people who are, folks who reach a higher standard. There's no reason the four of us could just go to Walmart in, Indiana and buy, 10 AR-15s. With, it just doesn't make any sense. So I think a good, meaningful second step would be that. At the end of the day, the Second Amendment, it is what it is, right?
From
We have
a
the Supreme
politi-
Court opining in the Second Amendment. We're not going to go
Peter,
around that.
from a political standpoint, the Speaker of the House, the Democrats control the House, and they don't control the Senate. But could they not call a special session in the next week where everybody comes back to Washington and Nancy Pelosi or somebody pick a member of the Congress, they put legislation and they vote on it, up or down, on exactly what you've asked for. So the Democrats react, okay? It goes over to the Senate. And then you can go after Mitch McConnell again for the Republicans, many of whom are going up for re-election, and maybe they don't want their suburban Republicans to think of them as soft on, as too hard on crime. But the Democrats aren't going to do that. And one of the reasons why they're not going to do it is because Nancy Pelosi is worried that some of the moderate Democrats who gave her leadership, who gave her the speakership, she doesn't want to put them on a bill where they may have to vote against the NRA because they might lose their election.
But
so she's going to make a political consideration instead of doing the right thing.
But they
Shut
literally
up
just
or
did
shut up.
this. HR 8. They literally just did it. It just happened. HR 8. 232 Democrats voted for it. 240 people, House members voted for it. 8 Republicans. It's out of the House. They literally just did what you just described.
Okay, so then we go back to Mitch McConnell. Back shortly. Bruce DuMont back in Chicago. Before El Paso, before Dayton, there was Gilroy, California. And Matthew joins us from Gilroy, California tonight to offer your perspective on the other mass shooting that took place last week. Go ahead, Matthew. Are you there? Matthew, are you there? Well, I guess you're not. Let's go to Bonnie in Crown Point, Indiana. Are you there, Bonnie? What's happening with our phones, folks? Line 4, Bonnie, are you gone? How about Eduardo in line 1? Are you there? Well, do we know why we have no phones?
Here we are.
Sounds like we have
Okay. Who are you, sir?
This is Eduardo.
Okay, go ahead. You're on the air.
Yeah, So I wonder if Mexico's considering gun controls, figuring that Mexico City is a shooting gallery. I mean, those cartels are armed to the teeth.
Well, I don't think so.
I've been to Mexico City a number of times in the last year. It's not a shooting gallery. There are certainly violent areas of Mexico. Mexico City is a pretty beautiful place, actually.
Okay. Did you want to also talk about mental health?
Yeah, well, I think that's part of it too. I mean, I don't think our schools should be educating our people. I think one parent should be staying at home and educating the son and daughter.
Well, but that's not going to happen, sir. That's a folly. It ain't going to happen.
Yeah, well, we need congressional approval on mental health.
Well, but what is it that you want to do on mental health?
Well, I think everybody that's in school needs to go through some kind of psychiatric evaluation.
Everybody
Even,
that's
going
in
and
school
getting a
should
job.
go some sort of psychological evaluation. I think a lot of people on the right and left, I think, would,
Both sides.
both sides would not like that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe,
Some sides-
maybe Eduardo, what you're saying is I think we need to do a better job in schools to kind of teach, mental and physical wellness to kids so that they're more, on top of things when they get out.
Okay.
I think in the
Eduardo,
schools they can-
thanks for your
Thank
call.
you very much. Have a
I
good
understand.
evening.
We're going to go back to Matthew. Are you there in Gilroy, California?
Hi, Bruce. It's Matthew from Gilroy. How are you?
Yes, thanks very much for calling. What perspective can you offer on what happened in your city last week?
Well, I wasn't at the Garlic Festival. I've been to it many times. The only thing I did want to reiterate is the issue of buying a weapon beyond state lines. I think in order to get this right, at least a first step would be to prevent that and have a federal level national gun approval program.
And
So
by the
you
way,
can't
that's
go
what
across
happened in
state line to get a
Gilroy.
weapon.
That's what happened in Gilroy. The shooter did not get his gun in California, correct?
That's
Correct. And
Okay.
at the same time, weapons of war like an AR-15 have no business in the public scene.
Jennifer, do you agree with that?
Weapons of war, I think that you have to kind of define what those are. I've heard semi-automatics defined as a weapon of war. If you're talking about an AK-47, yeah, I might go along with that and say that an average person doesn't need to have it.
How about something with multiple magazines and multiple firing mechanisms?
Not being a firearms expert, I don't really feel like I can answer that question. I think that part of the problem, though, for me, I look at this globally, and I look at weapons like this, and I say, okay, where did they come from? Did they steal them? Did they get them off of a military base? Was somebody from the military living with them, and they went ahead and got that weapon? We have to contend with the fact that somebody is always going to have access to an AK-47 or pretty much any other weapon that you can name. So I think that gun control
If they have
legislation...
access to it, should that be a violation of a crime that sends them to prison?
If it is,
Yes.
well, it
That's your
depends
yes.
on that depends on a gun law.
Go
If
ahead.
they're in possession of it or if they use it.
So
Both. Both. I want to just follow up with you. Both.
Not if they're in possession of it. I don't think you should go to prison if you're in possession of any weapon, quite frankly. If you use it, yes,
What about-
naturally.
Should the general public be allowed to have weapons that are superior to law enforcement? And you define
should
law
not.
enforcement.
They should not.
Okay,
They
that's
should
your answer.
not. That's
Okay.
It has
pretty easy.
caused.
Let's hear what
we have
Jennifer has
had
to
an
say.
enormous. There was, I know, a couple enormous massacres that occurred because people had those kind of weapons, and not only that, but they had body armor. So that's also a problem that you have to throw that into the mix. These things hopefully would not be something that people in the public would have. My question is how do you prevent people from getting them?
Peter.
So, yeah, I think you just said that no one should go to jail for possessing any weapon. If I have 5 Uzis at home that are fully automatic machine guns, I should probably go to jail because the one day that I get really upset, I might use them. That's kind of the.
Well, you confiscate them. That
well,
takes care of the problem.
Yeah, and I mean, you confiscate them and you put the person who possesses them in jail. No one's buying getting AK-47s from their buddy in the military. First off, it's not even an American-made weapon; it's a Russian weapon. Second of all, like the AR-15, you don't need to break into a military base to get it. You buy it from like Walmart in Tennessee and Kentucky.
Right,
Better
but
yet,
the
you could buy
bigger
it from
question
gun
is-
shows.
the bigger-
You can
Go
buy
ahead.
any of this stuff from gun shows. Sorry, Matt.
Guys,
Go ahead.
the bigger question here is, is the fact that you can get these weapons rather easily at a gun show also. So you're closing the gun show loophole, you're raising the age to 25. Cory Booker had a great idea today about a license for a gun where you have to be qualified to even own one. There has to be common sense gun reform in this country, and at the same time preserving the Second Amendment. It's a tough go, it always has been, but now is the time we have to make something happen.
Brian, do you think the idea of having a license to carry a gun or not have to own a gun?
Well, yeah,
is a good
I mean,
idea?
sure. I mean, you should be able to own a gun, but it should be it's about defense. I mean, we're not here to be offensive in our weaponry, right? So,
Okay.
do you really need
There are 5
automatic
million
weapon? I don't
more-
think so.
Sorry. According to Bernie Sanders, I haven't fact checked this yet, but there are apparently 5 million more assault weapons in private hands in America than there are in the military's hands. And I mean, to any of us, whatever side we're on, that's bizarre. That's crazy. How did the country get to this point? It's so strange. And I'm not saying take everyone's guns away. I studied the Constitution. We all understand what it requires. We understand the Second Amendment. The Supreme Court has held a certain way about the ability for us to have weapons and firearms. But there has to be a line, like a reasonable line, that just for our safety and our kids' safety and our family's safety, and that's all I'm advocating for, and I think it's all the majority of Americans are advocating for.
You said a couple of segments ago, Rick, that the tragedies in Dayton and El Paso, there are now been 249 mass shootings in the United States. The first one that I can certainly recall was back in August of 1966. It was Charles Whitman in the Tower in Austin, Texas.
Texas,
Many
right.
listeners are listening this evening. And this gets back to the caller in the last hour, and that was the tone then and the tone now. In 1966, the war was going on, the civil rights struggle was going on. Not a lot of Americans were at each other's throats, but that shooting in Austin, that wasn't followed by 15, 20 others within the next 10 years. There were other incidents. There was certainly, there was Charles Manson, which was in 66 or 69 rather. There were other things that came along, but they weren't on the level of Charles Whitman. So he was talking about the era.
So, I have 5, delightful to have 5 grandchildren right now, and I have, excuse me, 1 more coming in September. And I worry endlessly about them growing up in a society where, you now have active shooter drills in the schools. And so I don't care where you are on the gun safety issues. I totally agree with what Peter just said. Second Amendment is established law, and I haven't heard a Democrat, even left-wing Democrats, say, let's do away with the Second Amendment. I think, though, that we need as a nation to find a holistic approach because I think it is not just let's close the gun show loophole or let's get rid of these certain types of automatic weapons.
Agreed.
That can fire endless rounds off. Part of it is the tone that we have, the fact that when we now don't agree with somebody, we make them an enemy that has
But
to be terminated.
Has the era, the 249 mass shootings, has that era, when we look at that era, it's a horrible thing, but can we say, you know what, that's life in the United States. And if we have a First Amendment, and if we have a Second Amendment, we look at ourselves and say, you know what, we have these amendments, that's the country we live in, and the price we pay is every once in a while, sometimes when you have 3 in one weekend or 3 in 1 week, the price is you're gonna lose 29 people.
I hope we never, ever are so complacent that we come to that conclusion, Bruce.
I think that most of these shootings that happen in soft targets. It is a gun-free zones where most of these happen. I know it's an unpopular suggestion to Democrat friends of mine, and I do have Democrat friends, who think that arming people and having armed guards at schools, whether you're arming teachers, whether people can do concealed carry, is a bad idea and a recipe for disaster. But I'll tell you, there have been many, many cases where that is precisely what stops a gunman. And I think that reducing these soft targets is something we can do immediately. We're talking about immediate stuff, but we got to have gun control legislation immediately. I know something that would work immediately, and that would be to stop having such a vulnerable population. So.
If a Texas Walmart, where you imagine half people probably have guns,
I don't
was
think they
not
did.
able
I don't
to
think
stop
they
a guy from
did,
killing
because-
20
It's a
people,
concealed
I
carry
got news for
state.
you.
No, but the
It's
people
not
there
going to
didn't
work.
have
This guy walked in. He was holding a,
Yeah.
rifle when he walked in.
It's a concealed carry
We've got to
state.
pause. 1-800-723-8209. We've got some more callers on the line, but also we're going to talk about the Democratic debates. Bruce DuMont back in Chicago. Thank you very much for joining us. We're going to spend the next half hour of our show. By the way, if you're on the phone, you can stay on the phone, but we're going to be talking about the Democratic debates of this past week. And I want to begin with you, Rick, because you've been involved with Democratic politics for a long, long time. When you look at who jumped out from that debate as, who jumped out from the debate from your perspective, the two nights back to back?
I'll be honest with you. I don't know that I saw anybody, in my view, that jumped out. The first night, I thought that the format really got in the way of anybody even trying to step out. They had it a little bit more under control the second night, and I guess I would say the guy who was the most composed was Andrew Yang.
Yeah.
And I say that facetiously in that they spent so much time beating up on each other or on Biden because that's now the thing to do,
Right.
is to beat up on Biden. That it was very difficult to see anybody actually stand out after the debate was over. And that's my view.
On Monday, or on the first night of the debate, obviously it was Bernie and Elizabeth Warren very close, I thought, and everybody else was sort of in the wake of them. The second night, you had Biden, who was obviously taking an attack from Cory Booker and from Kamala Harris, until Kamala Harris caught her lunch from Tulsi Gabbard. But
Right.
I want to get your reaction, Peter, to both debates, because you're leaning towards Bernie Sanders, but put your analyst hat on.
Yeah, no, I agree with your assessment of Warren and Sanders standing out, and I think same for the second night. I think Elizabeth Warren, I find to be a very strong candidate. I think her views and Bernie Sanders' views are very similar. It's ultimately, to me, a question of who can, the American people in, Wisconsin, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Florida, look at and say, this person has my best interest in heart. And I think, due to no fault of his own, I think Bernie had a tough, run against Hillary. A lot of stuff came out. A lot of stuff will come out. And I think Elizabeth Warren has a certain polish and kind of finish that will be more resonant. So I think she's the front runner in my mind, along with Biden, of course, who has sort of like standing front runner status. I think Kamala Harris's actions as a prosecutor and lead attorney general of California are going to continue to come under the microscope. And I think her fortunes may change quickly.
Okay.
If I can add, though, and we were talking about whether polls still have value in one of the breaks, but while there is still polling, you have shown really, Biden is still exactly where he was before, which to me says nobody really stepped it up.
Yeah.
That's
a good point.
In previous years, you had challengers change the dynamics through those debates, and I'm not seeing it here.
A couple of
September
quick
debates might
questions
change
to our
it.
Democrats,
Maybe.
then I want the Republicans to weigh in. Did Cory Booker make somewhat of a comeback
I think
the
he
other
did.
night?
I think-
Because he
Yes.
wasn't impressive the first debate.
Yeah.
And obviously, he's taken this whole issue of what happened in El Paso. Again, I criticize because I don't think it's a good idea to call the president a racist, but he did. He got the publicity today. He was on all the shows. Kamala Harris, I haven't heard a peep from her on this issue.
Forgetting what Booker did today and just focusing on the debates,
Yes.
which was your initial question, yes, I think that Booker did better in that debate than Kamala Harris did.
Did Joe Biden, however, land a punch on Booker when he talked about Booker as the mayor of Newark and that it took the ACLU to get Cory Booker to clean up the police department? It took him 3 years to do it. He didn't do it on day one.
As a Democrat and as somebody who has served Democratic presidents and candidates, the thing that bothers me is that I know that people on the Republican side of the aisle are saving all this material, and so whether it's Biden or Booker or Warren
Or Kamala.
all this stuff that is being tossed, all these grenades that are being tossed, are going to be aimed at whoever the ultimate nominee is.
Brian, were you keeping copious notes on all these charges?
I didn't actually watch directly, but I got recaps, and it just seems like they go from crazier to crazier to crazy. I mean, it's insane, some of the things that they're doing and saying, proposals that'll never get passed, litmus tests that they all have to follow. It's crazy what's going on in those debates, and it's actually good for the president if he wants to get reelected, because they don't look very good. Many party leaders have said, including Rahm Emanuel, we don't see anything here.
Right.
We don't see anything
Jennifer?
here at all.
I think what's interesting, I watched the debates, both of them, and I think I kept thinking to myself, and you're hearing the audience applaud at more of the socialist proposals when John Delaney was trying to speak truth to power, that, hey,
Yeah.
this isn't
Yeah.
really going to work out.
He sounded
The
good.
audience shouted him
Yeah.
down. I kept thinking, this is great for the left wing, but how is this going to play in the general? Because there's going to be a whole other audience in the auditorium when the debate is played out. And I can tell you, and I think the Achilles heel of most of those candidates, and Joe Biden is very smart because he's not positioning himself to be a Medicare for all candidate, because
Right.
he knows that unions in particular, the Michigan, the Wisconsin people, the people from the Rust Belt, aren't going to take too kindly to the fact that Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and Kamala Harris want to take away the health care plans that they devoted all their attention to getting. They fought hard for this good health care. And so I think that when you look at this, is this a field that is going to be palatable to the middle? We know that Trump can pull from the middle, and I think the middle will hold for Trump. Can these candidates, and I'm not talking about John Delaney, I'm not talking about Tulsi Gabbard, and I'm not talking about Biden, I'm talking about the other people to the left, can they pull from the middle? And I don't think they can.
I think the problem that my party faces right now is when this whole process evolves and we end up with a nominee, it's not that Trump is going to draw those voters. I think that you're going to have people that stay at home. Really, the Democratic Party never healed after the Bernie-Hillary fight.
Or
And
they
I-
voted for Trump?
Yeah, I mean, I was
Yeah.
the backstage manager for the convention in Philly in 2016, and there were people up in the galleries there, screaming and shouting at a time when the party should be pulling together and unifying around a nominee. And I saw that happen in 2016. I am concerned that it is going to be happening again this time, where it's not just left and right. I mean, you have a lot of different variations here. I'm worried a lot of those people wind up sitting on their hands on election day.
Yeah.
Rick, I was at the Republican convention in Cleveland, and a lot of the regulars were not there. I was calling senators and congressmen, and they were on their cell phones at home.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So the Republican Party really didn't win that election. Trump himself.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Right. So
Right.
both of the
And
parties.
he's reminding
were-
people of that.
That's
were-
right. He won in spite of the party. I was there at that
Right. I
convention
mean,
too.
to be frank, that's how it really was. And so he knew how to talk to people who had been disenfranchised, I think they estimated that 6% of the people that voted for Trump hadn't voted in an average of about 20 years.
Right.
I mean, it's pretty amazing.
I think
what
Trump
happened.
got some votes because he spit in the GOP's eye. I think that was attractive to a lot of people in the middle.
Right.
And are you going to see, in a way, I guess Bernie and Elizabeth Warren kind of spit in the Democrat Party's eye.
Yeah.
But how is that going to play when it comes to bringing the base home? I don't know.
Well, also, I think you have Joe Biden, who clearly is the front runner at the moment. But I don't think, whereas I thought that Kamala Harris did a fairly good job in the first debate, I don't think she did a great job in the second debate. Because
No, not at all.
every time she talks, she's scolding.
Yeah.
And
Right.
then they put the split screen up. It looks like literally they're 3 inches apart, and she did everything but wag her finger at him. And I think that demeaned the vice president, and I don't think people like to watch other people scold people.
And she whines a lot. Really turns a lot of people off.
Right.
Yeah, no, this is an interesting conversation. I think just as people who are not even partisans, but just interested in the process,
Yeah.
it's fascinating. I'll say this, though. There are a lot of people out there who stayed at home when Hillary Clinton ran because they weren't hearing what they wanted. And what they wanted to hear are things like healthcare should be a right. Education should be a right. You guys may hear them as like socialist, far left things, but
Yeah.
in a large part of the world where we have countries that we look across and they're comparable Western democracies, those things are rights. And I think it's tough for the party. I don't have the answer. I don't know if it's going to be Biden. I don't know who it'll be, but I think that's the purpose of this process.
Except, Peter, a couple of things. One, you have a price tag attached to Medicare for all
course.
that is completely, ridiculously out of reach. Two, I think it is very difficult to take the health care that somebody's had. Some of us go back decades with health care. It has saved lives. Yes, it is too expensive, but to say, okay, we're now going to flip the switch and go to Medicare for all, and you cannot have the choice. I mean, we're supposed to be the party of choice.
Yeah.
And when you're not giving people a choice, you're sort of going away from the guiding principles.
And I know this was a tripping point between Obama and Hillary during those primaries too, because Hillary had the plan where if you like your health care, you can keep it. It's going to be a tripping point here, but I think there is a groundswell of folks out there who want to see a plan, even if it's a moonshot or beyond, a Mars shot. They want to see a plan, and we've seen some.
And what was going after Obama about? I mean, they went after Obama a couple of times.
I absolutely, it boggles my mind. Yeah, I expect,
He wasn't left enough
I
for that.
expect Jennifer
He
and
wasn't
Brian
left
to go after Obama. I do not expect people who were among the most zealous supporters of the Obama administration to go after Obama.
Yeah.
I think it was
yeah.
it was some desperation. Again, I liken
Yeah.
it to spiders in a jar. They're trying to get to the top, and they're looking at how far can we go with this. And I think we saw.
Well, I think you could expect de Blasio doing it because he
Right.
doesn't have any place to go.
Yeah.
Booker, it was sort of a Hail Mary. He's got to get back in the game, and between what he did then and today, he's saying anything he can
The
to
say
get
anything
on
crowd.
TV.
Yeah,
Back
say
shortly.
anything. Right.
Bruce DuMont back. Let's go to line 5. Nick is listening to us on KTSM in El Paso. Go ahead.
Good evening, folks.
Yeah.
Many people who this person knows, family, workers, classmates,
Yeah.
friends he talks to, know about the condition of this gentleman that came here to El Paso.
Uh-huh.
But they're afraid to pick up the phone and let somebody know. We had a case here in El Paso where a veteran, mental health problem, told his neighbor. Then he showed his neighbor the weapon he bought and kept on talking to the neighbor. But the neighbor never picked up the phone to anonymously report him.
Right.
After he
Well,
came to the VA and shot the doctor.
Yeah, that is one of the problems. I mean, you're dealing with a very touchy subject when you're dealing with someone's or making an allegation about someone's mental health. But again, see something, say something. I still think that's a good idea. Although in the case of San Bernardino last year, I mean, the neighbors knew what was going on, but they said nothing. There was a perfect example of they knew exactly what was going on with their new neighbors, and they kept their mouth shut, and people died in San Bernardino. We're going to move on to Brent, listening to us in Columbus, Ohio, on Sirius XM satellite radio. Go ahead.
Yeah, my question is, what evidence would there be to support that a gun-free zone leads to a higher likelihood of a mass shooting?
In other words, it causes it. I don't know whether there's been any statistics on that. I've always, I've never believed too much in that concept, but anybody want to take a tackle on that?
Not sure.
Your point, Brent,
Yeah.
is that a gun-free zone does not make people safer. Is that your point?
No. My point is, if you're going to make an assertion, which there was, I believe, a young lady on your show who has asserted that it will immediately be safer, I would like to know where I can find evidence to support such an assertion, because I can point to plenty of places where we've eliminated guns and seem to be more safe. So, and I can certainly point to the evidence for that. I'm assuming she has some for hers. I would love to hear it.
Yeah, I was, thank you for calling me young. I'm not very, but thank you. No, I did not say that it was going to, the gun-free zones are necessarily statistically proven to be the site of massacres. What gun-free zones are is once the guns start flying, once the bullets start flying, and it's a gun-free zone, naturally, the bullets are going to keep flying. So I think that the massacre, it could be a one-shot thing that turns into a massacre if it's a gun-free zone. I think when a shooter knows that there's a soft target, and they know that signs on the door, you're not allowed to bring guns in here, and they know there's no concealed carry in that area, they have the assurance that they're going to be able to pull off what they're trying to pull off without being apprehended or stopped. So no, while there is no guarantee, my feeling is if we're trying to hedge our bets and make things more difficult for a gunman, just like people who advocate gun control are trying to make things more difficult for a would-be gunman, I advocate that we take a look at these free gun zones and have a conversation about it. So.
Okay, thanks for your call. We're going to move on to Scott in Austin, Texas, listening to us on KLBJ. Go ahead. Are you there? All right, have we got anybody else on the line? Terry in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, this is Terry. I was calling because it seems like all these regulations you're talking about and background check are going to have a disparate impact on people of color and the poor and make it much harder for minorities to exercise Second Amendment rights.
In what way, sir?
Well, anytime you even mention any kind of ID when it comes to voting, there's this outcry of racism and discrimination. Minorities are much less likely to have the proper identification you need to do a background check.
Peter.
But you have a constitutional right to vote and to have your vote count. You don't necessarily have a constitutional right to own an AR-15. So
well, that's not for you to decide, is it?
Well, the Constitution has already decided it. So I'm just the messenger man.
Well, yeah, but you do have you shouldn't be denied a gun because of the color of your skin.
Oh, yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's not what any of us are saying.
But if you want to get an ID, you can get an ID. I mean, that's not a big
you can get
deal.
an ID for free. You can get a license for free. You can go to court and file a
Maybe
lawsuit.
they don't have a card to get around and do all those.
So basically, Terry, you're saying that African Americans would have a more difficult time getting a card or to register their guns, and it is discriminatory because of the color of their skin. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. We hear any time you request any kind of identification, it's discriminatory. So it seems like it would be here.
Yes. Your point is that the Democrats frequently use that as an excuse to be against voter ID cards whereas when it comes to the right to bear arms, they are perhaps African Americans are discriminated against.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Thank you for your point. We're out of time on that point. And I want to thank Peter Hanna for joining us this evening. Peter, nice to have you with us. Rick Jaskulka, thank you very much. First time you'll be back again, my friend. You've got a lot to say. Jennifer Nevins, thank you very much. Always excitable. And Brian Castle, thank you very much, representing the moderate wing of the Republican Party.
My pleasure.
And I want to thank Andrew, who was our director tonight, and Hector and Brita for their assistance in the production of this program. I'm Bruce DuMont. Until next week, good night from Chicago.
All right.